Hey guys, Demofleas here. I've got a tutorial here that's a bit of a follow-up on the crash course in rigging I did previously. In that tutorial, I showed you how to rig up an undulating tail, and on my website, there's a file for you guys to download to kind of follow along. I'll be using that to build off of. So you want to make sure to, if you haven't already, watch this first video and also download this file so you can kind of follow along here. So that previous tutorial showed you how to, rig up this tail, and while it moves nicely, you'll notice that the arms are noticeably absent, or they're just very rigid and they don't have the same kind of characteristics as the tail. So that's the whole point of this tutorial, is how do we add joints to this rig without destroying what's currently there, what's already there. And I've run into many times where I've gotten a model or an asset where it's partially rigged, and some portion of the mesh doesn't have anything where I need it, and I needed to add in that detail, add in that all those joints. So hopefully that's we'll be able to cover that and show you how to achieve that without breaking what exists there currently. So let's give this a start. The first thing, as I'm going through this, you'll notice I'm going to be hitting this a lot, this reset PSR button. If you don't already have it docked in your interface or have a shortcut assigned for it, character commands reset PSR. And all that does is takes an element and then zeroes out the coordinates to 0. So rather than going here and typing in 0, 0, 0, tap on that button once and it brings it back to 0. So I'll be hitting that a lot. You want dock that to kind of follow along. But the other thing is that you'll notice that this joint chain, as we were playing it to kind of simulate and get the dynamics going, as we pause, this doesn't, we'll hit reset PSR, but the joint chain itself doesn't get back to the defaulted state, the 0 state, where it's straight. And we definitely need that as we build this up. So in your playhead, if you rewind, that'll get us straight, but now as you click and tap somewhere here inside the object manager, you'll notice that it's already updating by itself, and we don't want that. We want that to only update and only do the dynamic simulation only when we hit play. So I think this comes on by default on the IK tag here. We want to go to dynamics and disable continuous update. Like I said, I think that comes in by default. So now when you tap on it, it doesn't do anything. And that's what we want. So rewinding will get us a straight joint chain and will allow us the defaulted state that we want to build the next step. And the next step is going into our front view. And what we're going to do is draw in some new joints. So go to character, joint tool, and if you hold down Shift X, you'll bring up the snapping tools. Make sure you've got snap enabled, vertex snap enabled, and make sure you've got nothing selected here in the object manager. And then here in the viewport, we want to go command and click and drag to the edge loop, the center edge loop. We kind of want to keep these things, on a point, on an edge loop. You definitely don't want it somewhere out in space here where it doesn't have any influence. You want it to influence, ideally on a point or on an edge loop. So that's centered up, and if we go to our top view, we just need to move this into place. So we'll go to tap on that root and go into the move tool, and because snapping is on, all that stuff should just pop into place. And when we kick back out to the perspective, that joint chain should be in the middle of our mesh, which is what we want. Just for clarity's sake, just so that we can focus in and on the joints that we're going to be working with, I'm going to turn off this spine, the visibility of that spine, and work with this arm. So if we middle click, close that out, middle click on that joint chain, that top joint, and let's rename this left arm. And while that's good, we get descriptive. We don't have, we need to number these. And there's a really handy, cool trick here. It's kind of like the Konami code. If you hit Shift C and type in naming tool, we want to break out that tool. It's also under Tools, Naming Tool. What we want to have, it's great for renaming things. So if you want to, replace left with right, you can do that here. But what you can also do is add a suffix, and that suffix is going to be a numerical value, and that numerical value is inputted by $_$n. Again, Konami code. I'm not sure how that works, but it's in the help, and I do know that when you hit replace name, everything that's selected gets numerically ordered or numerically named. Let's go with that. Cool. All right, so this next part, what we want to have happen is inside this weight tag. This weight tag basically has a list of all the joints that are going to be responsible for deforming this mesh. And currently, as you can see, it only has the spine joints in there. We need to add the left arm joint chain into here. So I'm going to tap on that little padlock to lock it and middle click to select them all and drag this guy down in here. So now as far as Cinema knows, the spine joints and the left arm joints are going to deform this mesh. This is our default state, so we want to be sure to set the bind pose, the new bind pose, to incorporate the left arm. And let's check out what happens when we select this and start playing it. Okay. So a couple things. It's not deforming the mesh, and it's not following along with the current joint chain. So let's stop. We'll hit reset PSR and rewind. Okay, so we needed to address those two things. We need that joint chain to follow along with the rest of it. Number one, let's do that. If you look at the spine, it would make sense that if you're looking at from the top down, that this arm chain would connect right here. And I think that's that's this spine 4 joint. We want that to kind of connect with that. So we can take this left arm joint chain and make it a child of that spine joint. And you'll notice that a new bone has been created. So that's good. That seems to make some sense. So let's run it again. Okay, I'm going to turn off snapping here. That's good. We've got a joint chain that the arms move with the rest of it, right? But we also need to have that same characteristic that we have going on in the tail. So let's fix that. Select that, reset PSR, and then rewind. So in this left arm, we can, I could say you could probably copy that, but I don't know what that's going to do, if that'll freak it out. So let's just make a new one. Character tags, IK. And under here, under tag, we want to define the end of the chain, which is that left arm 5. And, at this point, we also want to turn on dynamics, and basically we can copy these same values here, which is 100, 80, 20. So 100, 80, 20. And we also need to go back into our forces and set that to -1. That's kind of how all this magic happens. And then turn off continuous update. And now if we move it and run it, what happens? So the arm is moving along. It's bouncing along. I guess it could bounce a little or drag, a little more, but it's not moving the mesh. And it's not moving the mesh because even though we have in our weight tag, the left arm joint chain is listed there, we're missing something important in the actual weighting of those joints to the mesh. And what do I mean by that? Let's reset everything and rewind. And let's shift double click this weight tag. That's going to open up this weights manager. This weights manager is a visual representation of how these joints are influencing the mesh. As you can see, as I'm like clicking on each one of these spine joints, a different section gets colored. And that's to show you how much influence this joint, any particular selected joint, has on the mesh. So, this first spine joint only controls that portion in red. So let's look at the left arm. What's going on with these joints? If you select them, it's all black. Black means there's no influence whatsoever. It is, however, getting influence from spine 3 and spine 4, which is not what we want. We want to, it's fine for the body, but the arms we want to get rid of. We want to have those get deformed by these new joints that we're introducing. So how do we do that? Come over here to your character tool or character menu and go to the weight tool. And let's lock that, because what we want to do is under options, we want to erase at 100%. We want to erase some of the influence that spine 3 has on this portion of the mesh. You got to be careful here, because depending on what you do, you might end up erasing some of this stuff if you're not careful by you definitely just want to be thorough here about which portions you're erasing. So we want to make sure that all these joints get erased. And you'll notice these numbers here. See this as I hover over with the weight tool? It'll tell you, it says spine 4, 100%. It tells you the influence, like any particular point on this mesh. Let's just dial right in here to this guy right here. 507, that's a point that exists in the weights. It's all these points of this mesh are numbered, and 507, somewhere down here, has an influence of 100% by spine 4. If you hover over it, it gives you the little indication of what joint is actually controlling it, and how much control is being exerted onto the mesh by the joint. So spine 3, we just erased all that. You can erase all this, make sure that's all erased. And spine 4, if we tap on spine 4, now you can visually see, and with the numerical value, it's got 100%. So we're telling, with the weight tool, we're erasing the strength of the selected joint, spine 4, over these points. So I'm just getting a bigger brush stroke here, because we want to just get this done faster. I think there's probably a faster way to do this, but we're almost there. So I'm just going to keep rocking this. Okay. So now when we hover over, these should all be 0, 0, 0. We're getting visually, a visual feedback here that it's all black. And again, black means 0. And that's going to allow us to make these guys influence the mesh instead. Let's just we can paint this stuff on here. So instead of erase, we can go to add, and if we select a joint, let's just select number left arm 2, which is this middle one here. We can start painting on this, and it'll insert that new color. But, I find that this approach is really suited for like fine-tuning things. You can, really, what we want is just more bigger, broad stroke kind of things, because I don't want to, sit here and paint every section and go arm 3. Okay, that's this joint. I know I need to paint that, and maybe part of that, and part, arm 4 is this. And then when I look at it all together, that looks cool. It looks like it's going to influence it just fine, but the problem comes when you start deforming it. So I'm just going to temporarily put in a goal tag here, and that goal tag is going to show up right there Under coordinates, this is a really handy and really helpful thing to do when you start, when you need to go back to something. You want to zero something out, and these values, you want to return to this state. This null sits in this space right here, and it's associated with these values, but that's way too confusing. We want to do something called freeze transformation. And if you say freeze all, it'll take all these values and put them down here, and it'll zero everything out up top here. And that's handy because now when you move this around, if you ever need to get this null back to the default state, all you have to do is hit reset PSR, bam, and it jumps back to the spot where you first hit freeze transformations. So that's good. We want that. We like that. Okay, so now what we want to have happen, I've just put this in here temporarily because I want this joint chain to follow along with this mesh, or with these joints. And something seems not to be working properly here. Why is that? Let's go back here, and these joints should be moving along with, there it is. You know what? I think, did we turn off our dynamics here? Let's turn off all our dynamics for right now. So selecting both those IK tags, we can disable dynamics. And now, let's go back to 0, reset PSR, and then rewind. And so now the only thing that really should be happening, hold on a second. I think I said that too quickly. Now I'm getting all sorts of messed up. I turned on the dynamics, and this arm goal is probably what's freaked out somewhere. So let's reset that, and then rewind. All right, that's our default state. Let's turn off dynamics. I wish there was an easier way to do that. So if you guys know of any way or stumble on something, let me know. Right. I'm going to bend this joint chain a little bit. And you can see that there's weighting already on there, but that weighting is nowhere like, uniform or in any state that looks like natural. So in our weight tag, the weights manager, I just painted in those weights just kind of arbitrarily. And this is what I was kind of getting back to, is that when you start painting these weights arbitrarily, you kind of don't know, like, I've got too much of one thing and not enough of another. So I need broader brush strokes to kind of dial this in first, and then I'll make fine-tuning adjustments with the weight tag, with the weight brush. So how do we do that? Let's zero all this out. Let's kind of blow this up. Go to our weight tool, go to options, and then just here, let's just erase everything like we did from the start. Let's just kind of erase. Okay. We'll leave that joint chain bent so that way we can see the changes that we make in the weighting with this next approach. So rather than using the weight tool, what I'm going to do is go into the individual joints themselves, and there's something called falloff. And that falloff is a magical word that enables you to get a shape in the form of a cylinder. And if we size it up enough, let's say 30 by 30, that's a very familiar looking thing. If you've messed with MoGraph or any of the falloffs inside Cinema, we like that shape. I like that shape because with the falloff enabled now, it allows you to strengthen or taper off the strength of its effect. And so I'm painting weights with this cylinder shape that I can size up, that I can move up and down, left and right on the X and Y and the Z axes. So that's super cool. So let's we want to kind of dial this in. Let's get something like 25, 25, and then 23. This is the length of the thing, but as you can see, it's a little hard to see because it's dark, but this portion of the mesh here isn't being controlled by the fall off because the fall off is just not big enough. So we need to size up the size of the fall off, size up the fall off to where it encompasses the individual portions of the mesh. And that's really cool because now we can take this same approach and do it to the rest of the joints down the chain. And right now it's black and right now it looks all messy, but let's go to the fall off and enable cylinder. And generally you want to, copy the shape that you're most closely, that the mesh is closely shaped, mostly closely resembles. I can't speak. All right, so let's size these up again. Let's say 30 by 30. And this last one is ridiculously long because it's 100 centimeters. Let's just pull that down. And if we select them all, you can see the fall off is affecting that portion of the mesh, except for here and here. And I think that's because certain sections of the cylinder aren't long enough in Z space. So what I'm doing now is lengthening the fall off along the bone so that it overlaps with the previous bone. So if you look at this area here, this fall off ends up right there. And if you turn on that one, this one ends up over here. So if you enable both together, there's definitely some overlap there that we want. And so we just need to do the same thing for all these other joints down the chain. And this one doesn't look like it's large enough, maybe. Oops. Let's make this 35 by 35. Maybe larger? 40 by 40? Something's going on there. We'll come back to that. Maybe it's because this guy's not 40 by 40. Well, it's definitely large enough, but we just need to make it longer. Okay, so let's just figure out what exactly is going on here. Let's just make this larger. And once you come out of the weight tool, like by hitting the move tool or clicking off one of these joints, it should bring you back here. And let's just run this and see what happens. I guess we'll need to enable dynamics there, shall we? Run it. There's definitely something weird going on. And how can we figure out what's influencing? It looks like some things other than the joints are influencing that section, and maybe we missed something when we painted the weights. So let's go back to our default state and rewind, and let's turn off the dynamics. And if we shift double click into the weight tag to bring up this and go into our character weight tool, now we can see spine 4. That's our culprit. That still has some leftover. I don't know how that happened. I thought we erased you, buddy. Erase. Go away. All right. So now if we move this arm goal, that's a pretty good indicator of, how much this stuff is getting influenced. And at any time, we can go in and tweak these values. And as we tweak, you notice that the mesh kind of responds accordingly. We're adding some more influence of this joint onto this joint, so we're overlapping now. And that's way easier, at least in my mind, than at this stage in the game, to be messing with this fall off stuff than it is to be painting the weights on manually. So we'll go back to our move tool and click off one of the joints to bring us back here. And with that arm goal, that looks like it's bending pretty cool, like cleanly, I should say. Okay, let's reset that. Reset PSR. And let's actually get rid of it, because the next thing, if we kill that and then go back here to our reset bind pose, it should straighten that out. There's a little kink in there. I don't know if you saw it. but that's our default. I'm constantly going back to our default state because this next part is what we want to take this whole exact same setup and mirror it over from the left side to the right side. And we can do that with the help of the mirror tool. If we enable mirror tool and select middle click our left arm, let's close out our weights manager for this, because at this point I think we're happy with the way that those things are weighted. We just need to move it on over. So select all our joints, character, mirror tool, and let's select everything, because I think all these things are defaulted or set to default. What we want to do is replace left with right, and everything is going to get cloned here or copied as we flip from left to right. So all the positions are going to be in the proper place, the weights will be in the proper place, and hopefully the points and all this jazz will get mirrored over. So let's just let's run it and see what happens. Mirror. All right, so we got new joints, and we should also have a new joint chain that's also named right. Okay, yeah, cool. So left arm, right arm, and that right arm, let's see if everything is moving right or weighted right. So let's do our temporary add goal here, and we'll select that and freeze that transformation so we can zero it out later. And it looks like it's working. So now we can take, we can reset that, get rid of it, and let's test it. So we'll move this guy in the timeline, and it's not moving because we need to select our left and right arm IK tags and enable dynamics. And that's funny. Let's see what happens if we rewind and play. So now as we move it, cool. So we're getting some movement now, just like the original joint chain. Although that joint chain is not moving either because it's disabled. So now everything should be floppy. Cool. So that's kind of the gist of it. We got, these joint chains in the position that we want them. They're weighted properly, and they have the same characteristics as the tail. And we did it all without having to, break the previous rig. And, all the same kind of rules apply. And the important part is just after you've gotten the weighting of the falloffs the way you want them, and I think this is the last thing. Let's revert back to our starting point, rewind, and let's turn off these dynamics. So once you've gotten these guys in place, it's a pretty good habit to, in our weight manager here, all this stuff is being calculated on the fly, at least as I understand it. This is not really weighted in there. I think it's doing an extra calculation, basically. So you can select these left arm, these joint chains, these new joint chains that we created, and get rid of the fall-offs and actually bake the weighting information to the weight tag. So in the weights manager, select all those arms and then hit bake effectors. And then what happens is all those fall-offs get reverted back to none, but their influence is now kind of baked in into the joints. So as we click this, all those sections, all these joints have that influence on that portion of the mesh, and that's one less calculation I think it's got to do, so it doesn't have to do that on the fly anymore. It's kind of important to do that because sometimes when you're moving this guy around after we enable our dynamics again, what you'll notice is sometimes the mesh will as you move it, if you move it too quickly, some of that mesh, you'll see some popping going on. It's not doing it here anymore because we've baked those effectors, and that's essentially what that'll help alleviate. So take that extra step, bake those effectors, and once you've gotten that in place, you now have a character with an extra extended rig. One other thing, this is handy on the arms. You know, these arms no longer have that end goal. And so as it flops around, you know, this is these it moves and then it stays in place. It moves and stays in place in that same position. So you can still go through here and you know, in these IK tags, add the end goal to each one of these guys, or add a goal. Sorry, you don't need to drag anything. You just hit that button, and you get these extra goals at the end. So, you know, that guy doesn't need to stay up there. If he's like swimming in some heavy water or whatever, and you know, he's going up against a current, his arms are going to be kind of aimed backwards as he's fighting the current. And now, as you move it, you still get the undulation, but now his arms are in a different spot. So you can animate, you know, these arm goals, and you know, as you do, it's helpful to take these out of the joint chain so you can select them easier and reposition them, you know, anywhere you want. And also, you know, when you select them, go to object, and instead of dot, you can make these things like cubes and make them really noticeable, like that. See, this joint chain's way off, so now you can actually see them. And of course, you can also color code them too. So left arm, everything that's left would be, you know, colored blue. So if you go here to basic, use color, and say on, you can select the blue color, and everything that's red would be right. It's just an easier way to kind of help, you know, identify things inside the viewport when you start color coding things. And now it's easier just to, you know, tap on that and then you can select it. He said, oh, that's because I've got this. Here's another little quick tip. This is the selection filter. And right now it's only selected to spline. So it's only going to select splines. This main connector here is, if I stop it, did I just turn it off? I just turned it off. It was previously only set to spline, and that's why I'm not selecting any joints when I do this. I'm not selecting these nulls. I'm only selecting this spline. So you can turn that off, or you know, make it say these nulls. I only want to select nulls. So come over here, and instead of splines and joints, I'm only selecting nulls now. So selection filters are really handy for, you know, going in, and rather than going through this approach and it's like, where is it? It's here in the viewport. All I need to know is, you know, select that guy. And so I can move him pretty quickly. So now you can move his arms. And if we select both null and spline, we can move him too. So that's another little tip. I hope that's helpful. I know it's a little convoluted, so if you have any questions, please fire them away on the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter. It's @Demafleez, DEMAFLEEZ. And if you guys, you know, need some help, let me know. Or if you have something, an improvement to this, I'd love to know how to, you know, get to my default state without having to, you know, reset PSR, rewind, and get to there. There's got to be an easier way to do that, I'm sure. Somebody enlighten me. All right. So until next time, cheers.